You wake up, and before your nervous system has even fully entered the day, you check your phone. Texts, emails, notifications, headlines, videos, opinions. More information in 5 minutes than previous generations probably consumed in days. And most of us never really stopped consuming after that. Somewhere along the way, silence started to feel uncomfortable. Stillness started to feel unfamiliar. Many people now feel mentally exhausted before the day has even really begun. Not because they're lazy, not because they're failing, but because the human brain and nervous system were never designed to process this much information this quickly for this long.
Every lesson is a lyric in the universal song. Oh, the lessons of the journey, I'll weave them in my song.
Welcome back to Lessons of the Journey, your real life playbook. I'm Coach Nicole here with Coach Jen. Last episode, we talked about how having too many choices can create overwhelm, anxiety, and decision fatigue. And today we want to go one layer deeper, information overload. We are living in a time where human beings are exposed to more information in a single day than our brains evolved to handle. And while technology and access to information can absolutely improve our lives, constant input without rest, reflection, or filtering can quietly dysregulate both the brain and the body. So today, we're going to talk about what information overload actually is, what it's doing to your attention, memory, and nervous system, why so many people feel mentally exhausted all the time, and why clarity is becoming harder to access in the modern world. But we're also going to talk about hope, because awareness changes things, and understanding what's happening inside your mind and body can help you stop treating yourself like the problem.
Yes. So what exactly is information overload? Sometimes we hear that phrase and immediately think, oh yeah, I spend too much time on my phone. But what we're talking about goes much deeper than just your screen time. Information overload is what happens when your brain is taking in more input than it has the capacity to properly process, organize, integrate, and recover from. That's an important distinction because this isn't just about too much information. It's really too much input without enough processing time. For many people, the brain never actually gets a chance to finish processing before new information arrives. When you really stop to think about modern life, that makes sense. Most people wake up and immediately consume information and then continue to consume throughout the day, and our attention is constantly being divided. We listen while driving, we scroll while eating, we watch TV while texting, answer emails while half reading something else. And somewhere along the way, we normalize this idea that our brains should be able to continuously absorb information all day long without consequence. But our brains don't work that way. Your mind is not designed for endless intake without pause because the brain has a limited amount of working memory available at any given time. There's actually a large body of research around something called cognitive load theory, which essentially explains that when too much information enters working memory at once, our ability to learn, retain, and think clearly starts to decline. In other words, more input does not automatically create more understanding. Sometimes it creates confusion. Sometimes it creates mental fragmentation. And sometimes it just creates exhaustion. I think a lot of people are experiencing that exhaustion right now without fully understanding why. Not physical exhaustion necessarily, but mental exhaustion. That feeling when your brain feels full, when you can't focus, you can't think clearly, you can't decide what you even want to do next. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your mind has been processing nonstop stimulation for hours, days, sometimes years, without enough space to recover. And your brain is incredibly adaptive, but it is not limitless.
I am so glad we're having this conversation because I was just trying to express exactly this to my husband without having any of the words for it.
There you go.
I feel like, and I use the term mentally full. I have no more mental capacity, and how it affects other parts of my life too, my tolerance. I love that we're diving into this.
Yes.
This is so good and so timely for me and the world.
It's making sense for my mom brain, I'll tell you that. Why am I kind of okay throughout the day when I'm working off my calendar and then everybody's home all at once and it's so loud and it's so much and there's too much happening? And I just go, I can't do this. It's too much all at once.
I hear you lately. Like, I need to go to one of those silent retreats.
Yes.
I can't talk. No one else can talk. I take my phone away. Talk about the extreme. All right. Well, let's talk about what's actually happening neurologically. Because once you understand this part, a lot of modern life starts to make more sense. One concept researchers talk about is something called attention residue. This idea was studied by researcher Sophie Leroy, who found that when we rapidly switch between tasks, part of our attention stays mentally attached to the previous thing. Even when we move on physically, cognitively, part of the brain is still somewhere else. Think about how often we do this. You answer a text while you're listening to a podcast. Then you check an email. Then you open social media. Then you return your attention to the podcast. Your attention never fully lands anywhere. And over time, this creates a feeling of mental fragmentation, like your mind is scattered across 20 different places at once, which for many people, it is. Then layered on top of that is dopamine and novelty seeking. Modern technology is incredibly effective at capturing human attention because the brain is naturally wired to notice novelty, new information, new stimulation, new possibilities. Every notification, headline, video, algorithmic recommendation creates a small burst of dopamine activity. And dopamine itself isn't bad. It's part of motivation, learning, and reward. But when the brain becomes conditioned to constant novelty and interruption, something starts to shift. Our tolerance for stillness decreases. Our ability to sustain focus weakens. Patience gets harder. Silence starts to feel uncomfortable. And then the brain starts craving stimulation faster than it can process meaning. That explains so much of modern exhaustion because many people are consuming constantly, but rarely integrating. We're exposed to endless opinions, endless information, endless self-improvement advice, but very little time to actually sit with any of it deeply. To ask, what do I actually think? What do I actually feel? What actually matters to me? Without that integration, information can start to feel less like nourishment and more like noise.
Yes, I feel that so deeply. It does feel like just noise. Thank you for saying that out loud. When we're task switching, as we've been conditioned to do, we're leaving parts of ourselves with the last thing. That brings so many things full circle for me right now.
Isn't that crazy? I had never heard of that. That is such an insight.
Yeah. And this isn't just affecting the mind, it's affecting our body too, because our nervous system is constantly responding to the environment around us, including informational environments. One thing we underestimate is how activating constant input can actually be for our nervous system. And it's sometimes in a very subtle, chronic way. Low-grade vigilance, cognitive tension, a feeling of never fully settling. Because the body often experiences unresolved input as unfinished. And unfinished things tend to keep the nervous system slightly activated. It's almost like your brain keeps saying, hey, there's more to process, stay alert. And when that becomes your baseline, you may notice symptoms like brain fog, irritability, trouble relaxing, difficulty sleeping, emotional numbness, anxiety, feeling exhausted without physically doing too much. And that last one is important because many people tend to invalidate themselves when their exhaustion feels mental instead of physical. But mental exhaustion is still real exhaustion. Your brain uses enormous amounts of energy, and constantly processing, filtering, comparing, reacting, and switching attention all day long requires resources. Research has even shown that chronic stress and cognitive overload can increase cortisol levels and contribute to nervous system dysregulation over time. So, if you've been feeling mentally tired all the time, there may be nothing wrong with you. You may simply be mentally overloaded. And honestly, I think that realization can feel super relieving because it shifts the conversation away from why can't I handle life better to maybe my brain and body are asking for a different relationship with input.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like that right
Yeah.
there.
Maybe my brain and body
Yes.
needs something different. That's wild. We don't often make that separation.
No, that's a powerful statement. This is, again, so timely. Now, here's the interesting part. Even when information overload makes us feel worse, most of us still keep consuming. Why? Because modern culture rewards constant input. There's this subtle pressure that says, stay informed, stay updated, keep learning, keep optimizing yourself. And while growth and learning are beautiful things, there's a point where consuming stops creating clarity and starts replacing action. A lot of people are trapped in that cycle right now, researching endlessly, listening endlessly, preparing endlessly, but never fully landing anywhere. Now, I say this with compassion because it often comes from good intentions. People genuinely want to improve their lives, but sometimes we start confusing consuming with growing, and they are not always the same thing. At some point, information becomes a way to avoid uncertainty, to avoid action. Because continuing to gather information can feel safer than making a decision, safer than being still, safer than asking ourselves what we already know deep down. Meanwhile, the brain never gets a break from intake, never gets a chance to consolidate, never gets enough silence to hear its own thoughts clearly. And eventually, even helpful information can start feeling heavy, not because the information itself is bad, but because there's no space around it anymore.
This is all coming together for me here. I think about our kids. All of this overinformation is really not great for our kids' brains. There's really no time for the settling of the information. But I also think that we're not better off for it. There's a comedian, I wish I knew his name. He was talking about the word mindful. And he was like, you know what mindful was when I was a kid? Living. He was like, you went to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. You didn't go to the bathroom to sit on the phone and be there for an hour. When you took a bus to school and it was raining, you would literally watch the raindrop just go down the window. That was mindfulness. You don't have that anymore because you constantly have this machine with the input. This is the biggest shift we need to make as a culture. Most people are heavily focused on input, more information, more podcasts, more books, more videos, more opinions, more strategies, more. It's exhausting. But transformation doesn't actually happen through endless input. It happens through integration. And integration requires something most people aren't getting enough of anymore: space. Space to think, space to reflect, space to emotionally process, space to let ideas settle into meaning. Because your brain doesn't just need information, it needs space. And this is something neuroscience supports. Research shows that even a few minutes of wakeful rest after learning improves memory consolidation, meaning your brain continues to process information best when it actually has space to be still, which means pauses are not wasted time. Silence is not unproductive. Stillness is not laziness. Those moments are part of how the brain organizes experience into understanding. And honestly, we've lost respect for that. We become so conditioned to constant stimulation that a lot of people feel uncomfortable the second things get quiet. The moment there's silence, we reach for something: our phone, music, a podcast, a distraction. But sometimes clarity doesn't come from finding more information. Sometimes it comes from finally hearing your own thoughts underneath all of the noise. This is why so many people feel disconnected from themselves right now. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack access to information. Clearly, we have all of that at our fingertips. But because they rarely have enough uninterrupted space to actually integrate all of that knowledge. And without integration, knowledge can start turning into clutter, not wisdom, just accumulation. And accumulation without reflection can become incredibly heavy. Here's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to help you integrate. What is actually helping me? And what is just adding noise? What parts of myself have I stopped hearing clearly? And what do I actually need right now?
Nice. I do want to acknowledge that we realize we're giving you this information through a podcast. And yet we're also giving you the knowledge around it so that you can take the space that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And we're definitely not saying don't look for the knowledge. We're just saying create the space around it.
Yes.
So what does this actually look like in real life? Because many people are experiencing information overload without realizing that's what it is. They just think, I'm tired, I'm distracted, I can't focus anymore. But there are often very real signs that your brain and nervous system are overloaded. So things like difficulty focusing on one thing at a time, feeling mentally scattered all day long, starting multiple tasks and struggling to finish them, constantly checking your phone without even thinking about it, reading something and immediately forgetting what you read, feeling exhausted even after a relatively easy day, struggling to make decisions, feeling emotionally numb or disconnected, or realizing you haven't experienced true silence in a very long time. And one of the biggest signs is this feeling of always taking in information, but rarely creating clarity from it. So always consuming, rarely processing, always learning, rarely integrating, always researching, rarely acting. Many people are carrying around this quiet mental fullness all the time, like their mind has too many tabs open, too many unfinished thoughts, too many inputs competing for attention at once. Eventually, the nervous system responds to that because the brain and body are deeply connected. Your thoughts affect your physiology. Your attention affects your stress levels. Your environment affects your nervous system, which means constant information stimulation can eventually start feeling like constant internal pressure. And when people live in that state long enough, they often stop recognizing it as overload. It just starts feeling normal.
Yeah. Fun story for all the folks out there. I gave myself a concussion recently. And everything you're saying, Nicole, is what the doctor says about having a concussion. Guess what you do when you have a concussion? You rest. You literally rest your brain. They say, hey, put your phone down. Don't watch TV. You're literally stopping your brain from taking in all of that input when you have a concussion. That is what they recommend. Everything you just said, that constant internal pressure and not knowing how to fix it. When you have a concussion, you rest your brain. When you're living your life this way, rest your brain.
Yeah.
It's wild.
A lot of those things, those are basically the things that are ADD. Or ADHD. And I'm going, are we literally muscle memorying ourselves to the point of ADD and ADHD?
I don't disagree with that.
And I can't answer that because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. Yet you see similarities. I am a human, have known people with ADD and ADHD. And I look at that and go, wow, that feels like we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
I personally pick up my phone through muscle memory at this point. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Guess what, Nicole? There's a hopeful part in all of this.
Yay.
Because, and you and I love this word, awareness. It changes things. Because once you understand that your brain and your nervous system may be overloaded, might be, could be, definitely is if you're listening to this, you stop approaching yourself with so much criticism. I'm patient zero on that. I am so critical of myself. Why can't I focus? Why am I so tired? Why can't I think clearly? We're all asking ourselves these questions. So when we bring awareness, we can start asking ourselves, what kind of environment am I asking my brain to function inside of every day? That changes the picture, doesn't it? That's a very different conversation. I also want to say this. The answer is not to completely disconnect from the modern world. Technology isn't inherently bad. Information isn't inherently bad. Learning is not inherently bad. We're not telling you to stop.
Silent retreat. Silent retreat.
We should find one and go together, Nicole. I've been thinking about
Seriously.
that too. The issue is the absence of boundaries, filtering, recovery, and intentionality. The issue is that many people are constantly consuming without enough space to process. And over time, that can disconnect you from yourself, from your thoughts, your intuition, your emotions, and your clarity. Because clarity is not created by endlessly consuming more. Sometimes it's created by finally becoming quiet enough to hear yourself again. And I hope that's where we're headed next. Not toward perfection, not toward becoming someone who never uses technology or never consumes information, but toward creating a healthier relationship with input, toward mental spaciousness, toward nervous system recovery, toward learning how to clear the noise enough to actually feel present in your own life again. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode.
Yeah, this definitely gives me a lot of insight into asking myself questions of how can I create the space.
If we're going into takeaways, that is it for me. It's okay, I have access to all of this. What am I going to do with it? When is there actually time? Now, you and I know this because we are coaches. The integration piece is so important because not all pieces of information is going to be monumental in that moment. Our brains need to take that information, go about our lives, and let it process and integrate into what we've got going on. And sleep is important. We're allowing the growth there.
Mm-hmm.
I love the creating the space in your brain, the idea of brain spaciousness.
Yes. When we did the episode, a couple episodes ago on the expressive writing for processing and 20 minutes of writing, but it's the 23 hours and 40 minutes that you're not doing the writing. That's actually the processing time. If you're letting it be the processing time. And I'm thinking, wow, I bet that's even more effective if you give yourself the space. I'll admit, I wake up in the morning, I pick up my phone, I play a game. And I don't know why I do that. It's just probably habit. And I've been thinking about it lately. Like, why are you picking up your phone? Why aren't you thinking about your day and processing in your brain, like what's going on? It's interesting because I've been thinking about Tim and I do our nightly practice of doing our gratitudes and our prouds. And I thought maybe we should have an intention setting in the morning where we just talk to each other. Because when we're just talking to each other, we feel more connected. We feel more complete within ourselves. It's so much better of a practice. So this has got me thinking about how do I create this space? Yeah, I love this. Attention residue was huge for me as far as a takeaway. I always knew you couldn't actually task switch. I never knew the term attention residue. And that makes so much sense because your brain is still there. You're like leaving little trails of your brain. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but they have these little wisps of memories that they pull out. And I'm like, I could just see these wisps going in different directions from my brain, not of memories, but of like attention. Yeah. I'm going, oh my gosh, no wonder I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Yes. Well, you know, I think every woman, and I feel comfortable saying every, you know, we're not supposed to say always and never or things like that. Every woman I speak to can relate to, oh my gosh, the 87 million tabs that are open in my brain at any given point in time. Yeah. And we've just as a society decided that, yeah, that's normal for women, the unseen mental load. But what if part of what we're doing is to ourselves? Yeah. What if these 87 million tabs could really be 10? Because we haven't processed the rest of the 87 million. Yeah. This is blowing my mind. So I'm moving from, oh yeah, it's just how it is being a woman and a mom to, I bet you I'm doing it to myself and I really don't need that amount of stress. What if, and I love this phrase that we said earlier, what if my brain and body are asking for a different relationship with input? And I'm going to sit with that for a little bit.
Yes,
That matters.
absolutely matters. One other takeaway I had was we live in a society now where I feel like mental health is really more at the forefront than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really grateful for that. And yet I do think we still invalidate mental exhaustion.
Yes, agreed.
Now is the time for us to stop invalidating mental exhaustion. We know mental health is important. Mental exhaustion cannot be invalidated. And we have to start with validating it within ourselves first.
I so much agree with that. And I'm making a very big man-woman distinction. I'm going to say the average. And I've run into this in my own home. If I have not been able to express a physical ailment, like my stomach hurts or I have a migraine or something like that, the boys in my house look at me like, what do you mean there's something wrong with you? You're fine. You're fine. And if not being able to point to a physical ailment almost invalidates that for some people in your lives. And so I would really love for us to start moving the stigma, like what you just said, Nicole, toward mental exhaustion is a real thing, even though you can't see it outwardly.
And I would even say on the opposite side of that, I think there's a lot of men that are mentally exhausted because of the roles that they play.
Yes.
And because of them not being able to talk about the mental stuff that's going
So
on.
much
with them.
agreed. Yes.
Because even though mental health is at the forefront, I do not feel it's at the forefront for men yet.
Yes.
And society needs to get there so that men have the right to talk about their feelings, their emotions, what's going on with them. I was listening to a video of Trevor Noah as I was gathering more information in my world. But he was talking about the fact that if men connect to hang out, they have to go somewhere or have a reason. And it can't be just to talk about how they're feeling.
Yeah.
It hit me hard seeing that. It was like, you know what, that's true. Men do not have the safety yet to be able to just say, like, I could call you and say, I want to talk about how I'm feeling. You'd be like, yeah, let's talk, right?
Yeah.
Women, it's easy to say these things. Men, it still carries a lot of stigma. Yeah, this invalidating mental exhaustion is big for all sides. Yeah.
Agreed. Great point. Let's just all be a little kinder with each other, huh?
Yeah. Why aren't we asking that? Are you just mentally exhausted? That's okay to ask someone.
Yeah.
We ask people, have you been doing too much? Are you tired from all the things you've been doing? Are you just mentally exhausted?
Yeah.
And let it be a thing. It's okay to be mentally exhausted and to admit it.
Yes. And sometimes just having the safety and space to be able to say the phrase out loud relieves so much of that tension.
Us just having this conversation and having said the words mental exhaustion 5 or 6 times makes me feel safer talking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm who I am. Like, I talk about all of my things. And yet for me, I have more permission because it's being talked about more. This is wonderful.
I love this. Okay. Questions. I have a would you rather, Nicole.
Oh, okay.
Would Nicole rather always feel understood or always feel appreciated?
Understood.
Tell me more.
I have such frustration with not being understood. I like to be appreciated, but I need to be understood. And it's within my inner circle. I need the people to understand me. And it is one of those things when I see the opposite of somebody's not understanding someone else and the other person's okay with it, I go, how are you okay with that? It makes me nuts. Appreciation is wonderful. I appreciate being appreciated. I don't need it in my core. I need in my core to be understood. It's just more important to me.
I resonate with that answer.
Yes, I get that. All right. My question for you, Jen, is who is someone you find attractive that most other people don't seem to, and what is about them that appeals to you?
Ooh, I don't have like a specific name that anybody would know, but I have found myself very attracted to wit. So if somebody can move fluidly in and out of topics of conversation and be quick-witted with general knowledge, I'm talking about like we moved from this to this to this and it was fluid and easy. Because I don't like small talk. I'm not like a, hey, how's the weather kind of person. We're beyond that with me. And so anybody that can really lock in and move fluidly with me and make me kind of go, oh, that is so attractive to me. I can spend time with that person day and night. I love real conversation, deep, willing to share, willingness to get into it, right? That is the most attractive quality to me in humans. I love it.
Oh, I'm so surprised that that's a quality. I'm like,
shocking.
You literally show up weekly to have deep conversation.
Yeah.
So it's me. I'm the one who's sexy to you.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah. I think even back when I would go to bars and clubs in my 20s, if I could find somebody to talk with.
Yeah.
Even if somebody that I didn't find physically attractive, humor and wit, just the ability to flow, I am very attracted to. It is a human quality, man, woman, whatever. You are my people. I would rather spend time in that than anything else. So, okay, not shocked, but yes, there we go.
Nice. Yeah, it makes sense. And I can relate to that. I'm with you on that. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you've been feeling mentally exhausted, overstimulated, emotionally scattered, or like your brain never really gets a chance to rest, I hope this conversation helped you understand that there may be a real reason for that. Not because you're weak, not because you're failing, but because your mind and body were never designed for nonstop input without recovery. And sometimes healing starts with simply recognizing I'm overloaded, not broken, overloaded. And awareness like that can change the way you treat yourself, the way you structure your days, the way you relate to information, silence, rest, and attention. Because your brain doesn't just need more input. It needs moments where it can finally breathe. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's been feeling mentally overwhelmed lately, someone who's constantly consuming, constantly taking things in, but hasn't fully understood why they feel so exhausted. Because sometimes understanding what's happening inside your mind and nervous system is the first step toward creating real clarity again. Thanks for being here, and we'll be back next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Write your life.